So, Bryce Fortner, thank you so much for joining our panel today on cinematography to talk about your wonderful new Amazon Prime movie, I'm Your Woman, with Rachel Brosnahan in a very different role than Mrs. Maisel. And the first thing that struck me watching this, it's set in the mid 1970s, and there's such attention to detail in the production and the costume design. Did you think about using lenses from that time period?
We definitely did. It was part of the early discussion. I think it's always going to be a factor if you're shooting a period film to kind of have those thoughts and discussions. But it was very important to Julia Hart, the director, that it didn't feel like she put it like a museum film. We didn't want it to be. We wanted it to be something where the audience was experiencing what was happening, as opposed to looking back on a moment in time. So we wanted them to be more of an experiential feeling and process watching the movie. And we thought that by going with slightly newer lenses as opposed to vintage lenses, that allowed us to kind of do that.
But then I felt watching it, I mean, I'm going to say that there was a slightly gritty feel to the film. There was some,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so how did you do that?
So we definitely, we were of the mindset that we wanted, in terms of the periodness of it, we wanted the wardrobe and the production design to speak to it more than the photography in terms of like a literal sense. But what we did is we also knew that we were shooting a 70s crime drama. So kind of owing a lot to that kind of genre and wanting it to at least be in that universe, we did. I shot everything at like 2000 or 2500 ISO on the Alexa. Not an insane amount of noise, but I think enough that, kind of combined with the slightly newer lenses we shot on the Cooke SF anamorphics, that it would kind of just take the edge off a little bit and soften things a little bit. It also allowed us to work small and quickly. I tend to light a lot with practical light only for nighttime interiors, and it allowed us to do that a lot more efficiently than we would have otherwise.
So I know that Julia, who also co-wrote the film with her husband, Jordan Horowitz, he's a producer as well. I mean, I know before you began filming that you guys came up with a shot list, right? And you'd look at it, review it every weekend. So how much change was there to that on the fly? Like first of all, how long was the shoot? How long did you guys?
I want to say it was maybe in between 35 and 40 days. I don't remember exactly, but somewhere in that realm.
Right.
And I want to say we had about 6 weeks of prep. And the entire film was definitely, we spent almost like every free moment we had together shot listing, for better or worse. And the whole film was done before we started. And I'd say rarely things changed on the day. I'd say probably about 90% of the time the shot list was what we did. But we're also big believers in doing that shot list, doing that work, so that we can be more reactive on the day when things inevitably change, because we were shooting with, twin with 6-month-olds. And so we had to kind of be reactive to like, okay, this baby is just not giving it. So what do we have to do? And so I think by doing that work ahead of time, it allowed us to be a little looser.
Yeah, I mean, really a shout out to the baby who does a lot of shouting out.
So he was amazing.
I mean, but what is that like though? Working on is that with the babies, the twins coming, and you just mentioned you're a new father yourself. That's good, because there are time constraints about how much you can film an infant, right?
Totally. Yes. Yeah. Very, very strict. And I don't remember what they were offhand, but very strict constraints on what you can and can't do with an infant. You can't use atmosphere when infant's on set, certain times a day, all that stuff. But having twins was obviously really important, because there would be times that one twin just was not having it, and then you bring in his brother, and then it was like, holy cow, you put in this like amazing performance. He would like smile on cue or something like that. It was really pretty cool, and definitely kept everybody on their toes, on their game, for better or worse. There's a couple shots in the film of the baby sleeping. And there's like to get that shot, there's two in particular that are very important, but there's one where like Rachel, the mom, like sneaks into the crib at night and puts the sock on the baby, and the camera starts on the sock and pans over to the baby's face, and he's sleeping. And that was a shot that we wanted to get. You obviously can't have a baby act asleep. So we set the shot up before lunch. We went to lunch. The mom fed and nursed and the baby, and then set him down to sleep in the crib. The crew kind of came back in. The lights were all set. The camera was on, and we just like very quietly got that shot while the baby was actually sleeping, which I've never experienced, but it was really kind of amazing when it worked. It was such a good feeling to be like, holy shit, we just did that. It was like great. And it was there's two moments of him sleeping that are so sweet.
Yeah. And then the polar opposite of that is the scenes in the nightclub. And I thought what was so compelling about that was the vantage point from the phone booth. And so how did you achieve that to this non-technical person?
That was a set that was built within the basement of, so we shot the nightclub in what was actually a nightclub. We just kind of, turned it more 70s than it was in its bones. But then we shot the hallway was a set that was built down in like the basement of this location. It was important to Julia very early on that she goes into this phone booth, and the camera needs to be present in there with her. And we also knew we needed to have a wild wall behind the phone booth so the operator could actually get in there with her without trying to fit two people in an anamorphic lens in a tiny little box.
And then I think there's such a wonderful shot when they're sort of fleeing the nightclub, and that beautiful down the street that with all the neon lights, and it's the
Yeah.
contrast between the violence that we've just seen and that wonderful sequence where she's trying to escape, and it's such a kaleidoscope.
Yeah, and it
Uh,
was fun because I mean, obviously up until that point, the colors were intentionally very kind of subdued when she's at the house at the cabin, and so when we got to the club, it was fun to then kind of have this explosion of colors, and then when that final thing where she's trying to escape, just like the lights, so we had operator guys moving, panning lights, and it just was like colorful and chaotic. And that shot you mentioned, I'm really proud of. It's like it's just done on a Techno, it's a oneer, but it's like it's awesome because it pulls her from the door. She goes and gets this like black void. You don't really know what you're building towards, and then it goes up to this nice big, it's like the sound, the visual all sync up, and it's a really nice reveal of all the chaos outside.
and then another sequence that it just felt so of the moment of the 70s is the chase sequence. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, did you sort of look to any films from the 70s for inspiration for that, like
Oh,
French
totally. I mean,
Connection?
we watched French
Yeah,
Connection, we watched Bullet, we watched a
yeah.
bunch of stuff, and it was funny because like the thing that we kind of came down to, those were obviously in that genre, is that they didn't have. I mean, those films especially were very minimal with their coverage. There was like handheld in the cars with these guys. It's like car to car stuff. That wasn't anything super fancy. So we knew that we wanted to keep like our dialogue coverage inside the cars handheld when they were talking amongst each other. No car mounts, no hostess trays or anything. And then just to simplify things a little bit, instead of doing true car to car, we did have a Russian arm, a pursuit vehicle that was on a very wide lens and just kind of led and followed. Um, and
And I think what's so interesting about this film, I'm Your Woman, is that it's a woman driving the car. It's a female-driven narrative. Um,
yeah.
when I was doing a little bit of research on you, I was really the fact that you started out with a degree in screenwriting. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think that knowledge of storytelling informs your work as a cinematographer? Because I feel like
Yeah.
the shots tell a story in themselves, like you say when she's leaving the nightclub. That's
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
tells a
that's kind of like always my goal is, I mean, A is to kind of not really make my presence known, but then also just really I appreciate story and performance, I think more than anything. I love my job, but I think to me I feel better about my job when I'm setting up the performers and the director to I don't know to succeed. And so having that background, that degree in writing, I'm not a writer. I have no aspirations to be a writer, but it definitely gave me an appreciation for a good script and for the importance of those things and also how hard they are. So if I can do anything in my power to make that easier or to shine on screen, then that's my aim.
So to that end, is there where you've sort of almost like sacrificed a shot or what because it's not going to forward the story, it's not going to work for the actors, whether in this project or another one, where you've had
Yeah,
to
I'm sure
compromise your
that's,
vision?
yeah, I mean, inevitably that always happens, but it was, Julie and I are very much in sync on this. It's like we just don't want to do something that looks cool just because it's cool or something. So if there was a story reason why we did a cool shot or whatever, why something it was always came from story. So I don't actually feel like there was ever a time that it's like I wanted to do something slick or tricky that I didn't get to do because of story. I feel like it was always integrated and motivated by the story, and so we were set up to succeed as opposed to sacrifice on that.
What I think is so interesting is that you and Julia first worked together on Stargirl, which is
Hmm.
over on Disney Plus. I mean, this is so different. I mean, the fact that,
So different. Yeah.
woman writes and directs both and you shoot both. I mean, what was it for this one that you were able to do that you couldn't do on Stargirl? Was there anything in I'm Your Woman that you got to kind of
Yeah, I mean, I think
add to
just
your
kind of play
palette?
play more with underexposure and with grittiness and grain and things like that. It's like they're both really like if you observe them from a distance, they're both lit very similarly. I mean, I guess because I'm the same DP, so the thumbprint is the same, but they're definitely just the palette of I'm Your Woman. We got to play with it a lot more. The fact that it was in the '70s meant that we got to do certain things like again, we weren't trying to make a '70s film, but we did do things like we worked with zooms, like slow zooms and things like that, and trying to work with camera blocking and trying to get it in oneers as opposed to, edits and things like that. So that was a fun challenge. And also just because the '70s just happens to be a genre that Julie and I really respond to, it was really fun to kind of pay homage and work in that realm. They were in that vein.
Well, it was really fun to watch. So thank you for giving this
Awesome.
to us. And I look forward to talking to you later with the rest of the
Yeah,
panel.
sure.
Thanks
Yeah.
again, Bryce.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.